Joining us on the line now, James Rosen, Fox News Channel, Chief Washington Correspondent, bon vivant, man about town, all-round fine fellow. Good morning to you, James.
Dig in the bumpin' music, guys.
You're all about Abbey Road, baby.
We always try to take care of you in that regard, James. You know.
Good
listen,
to be with you both.
It's good to have you because there's so much we want to talk to you about. We start off, you've been covering the negotiations with Iran, and we had a deadline. But the deadline doesn't mean anything because the deadline is moving all over the place.
Yeah, we've had 3 deadlines, in fact.
That's right. So where are we in this thing? And is a deadline really a deadline if it doesn't mean anything and it doesn't? And we just say, well, we didn't meet that deadline, so let's set another deadline.
Well, as reporters, we know intimately that deadlines
that's
mean
right.
something. And if we didn't meet them the way these negotiators are not meeting them, I don't know that we'd be employed. But look, the latest signs out of Lausanne, Switzerland, where the Iran nuclear talks are taking place, is that you see a number of the foreign ministers, the counterparts to our Secretary of State, John Kerry, leaving Lausanne, Switzerland.
What does that mean?
Now there's only about 2 or 3 of them left. And what you're hearing is the usual kind of diplomatic mishmash. I'll try and make sense of it. But we've got, for example, the Russian foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, having left Lausanne earlier today, saying that, in essence, everything's agreed to. We just need to put it on paper in the next few hours or the next few days. And yet China issued a statement saying, their foreign minister, saying that, in essence, people need to compromise. If the talks are stuck at this point, it will be a waste of the 16 months we've spent negotiating. So it's really unclear right now what's happening in that room. We have some broad ideas about what the Iranians are demanding, what the Americans are demanding, and so forth. But it doesn't look like there's a deal as of this minute.
Well, I mean, the comment by the Chinese person there about 16 months could be wasted, that's what driving this now? I mean, is it that, well, we spent all this time, we can't walk away with nothing?
Negotiations in general, the longer they go on, the more it is the case that they take on a kind of logic unto themselves that can sometimes be utterly divorced from the context that in which the negotiations arose in the first place, such that getting a deal becomes the goal rather than solving the problem, which existed at the time the negotiations began in the first place. That could be happening here.
James Rosen, a lot of people in this town love to start out a sentence by saying, well, I'm a student of history, and they always say that to make them sound a lot smarter than everybody. But you, sir, are in fact a student of history, and so I dwell on I'd like to draw from your wealth of knowledge there and point to the last major negotiations the United States had with an adversary. That would be Ronald Reagan's nuclear talks with Gorbachev in Reykjavik, Iceland, where he bravely stood up from the table, walked away, and said, no, I don't like this deal. We're not going to have a deal. There's no deal. And everyone was stunned, and everybody, criticized him. But many people point to that, James, I think rightly, as the beginning of the end for the Soviet Union. That you wouldn't have seen the Soviet Union crumble and fall if Reagan had not walked away and not thrown them the lifeline that they wanted. Is there anyone at this table who has that courage on behalf of the United States to walk away?
Well, Larry, as a student of history, it was so ripe. It was there.
Yes.
It had to be done.
Thank you, sir.
Well, there are those who, at the time, who characterized the negotiations at Reykjavik as an absolute failure, and then in short order thereafter, which wasn't predictable at the time that the Reykjavik talks collapsed, we in fact did secure some nuclear accords with the Soviet Union. And you're quite right that Reagan showed courage to walk away because he wasn't getting what he considered a good deal. Right now, I'm reluctant to frame it as a matter of courage, but I will simply say that it does not appear that the United States has been willing to walk away from the Iran nuclear negotiations. They've been extended 3 times now. At the White House yesterday, the spokesman, Josh Earnest, said that we will not wait until June 30 to walk away if we're not getting what we need from this deal. We should point out to your listeners that June 30 is the real expiration date for this round of talks.
Right.
The March 31 deadline was one that the parties had set informally as the date by which they wanted to secure some sort of political agreement, some basic rough agreement on the terms, and then they'd spend the remaining 3 months hammering out the precise technical details. And there's a lot of technical details involved in these nuclear negotiations about what kind of centrifuges you're allowed to operate, where will your enriched uranium be stored, to what level will you enrich the uranium. It gets very technical. But they didn't have that as of March 31st, and they decided to extend it into one more day. Is it a lack of courage that keeps them extending the deadline, or is it their fervent belief belief that this is the best path forward for the stability of the Middle East. We report, you decide.
All right. So, look, you're right about Reagan. He did secure some things in his negotiations with Gorbachev, but he was very sure about one thing. He said, we're going to trust but verify. Mm-hmm. And the Iranians and some of the reporting that I've seen of late suggested that they would not be in favor of snap inspections by the nuclear inspection teams. Well,
right.
What kind of verification can you have if you can't make a surprise inspection?
So much of what's happening in these negotiations is occurring on two planes, if you will, Brian. One is the actual negotiations inside the room, and the other is what is said for public consumption back home. And in each case, the negotiators have sort of to face rearguard actions. John Kerry has the United States Congress more or less united across ideological lines in wanting to impose further sanctions on Iran, and he has to deal with that. And the Iranian negotiators have the hardliners in Iran, particularly in the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, which owns the military side of the nuclear program, who don't want any deal, who regard any deal as an encroachment on their national sovereignty. So if you hear an Iranian negotiator say something like, we don't want to submit to snap inspections, you'll hear the Americans saying this will be the most intrusive inspection regime in arms control history. What you're seeing is the negotiation play out on those two planes.
James Rosen, what about the U.S. Senate? They've sort of held their fire here. They were going to vote for increased sanctions last week. They pushed that back as the deadline was pushed back to the 31st. Are they going to wait now until the 30th to bring in this bill for increased sanctions, or do you think they're going to make a move?
Well, I believe that Congress reconvenes April 14. There are those who have suggested that that's why the date of March 31st was set as a deadline for some sort of political agreement that the parties could trumpet to their respective rear guards. I can't say that I know the precise timetable for Senate action, but I do know that you've got almost a unanimous United States House of Representatives and United States Senate itching to impose more sanctions on Iran. And one of the key problems for the negotiators is the Americans, and there's a great article in today's New York Times by David Sanger about this, the Americans are all about quantifiable numbers. They want to be able to show Congress, here's how many centrifuges we've limited them to. Here's how high they're going to be able to enrich uranium, to what levels. Here's how many years it's going to be before they can do X or Y. Yeah. The Iranians are all about national sovereignty and pride and this great national project into which they've poured billions of dollars over in great secrecy over 25 years. And so that's the key to the deal, is whether or not Secretary Kerry can hold something up that says, here's how they're constrained. Here's the numbers that show they are being constrained.
You know, I just had another quick question on another topic. I know that you are a poker of bears and a stirrer of pots. And I noticed...
You make it sound dirty, honestly.
I know. You really got people riled up with this interview you did for Playboy of former Vice President Dick Cheney.
Yeah, this appears in the April issue of Playboy, which is out now. I ran into Dick Cheney at a party about a year ago, and I mentioned to him that I had a beef with him, a bone to pick with him, some pots to stir, which was that 10 years earlier in 2005, covering a trip of his for Fox News, I was supposed to get an interview on the trip. The trip got cut short, and I never got the interview. And if we were to amortize the 7.5 minutes I'd have received in 2005, we'd be up to about 28 hours of Nixon Frost-style interviews. Yeah. He agreed to 6 hours of an oral history that he did at his house in December. It turned into 10 hours. 1/10 of that material appears as the Playboy interview with Dick Cheney in the April issue, and I commend it for your reading for the article.
Yes, of course. And did anyone at Playboy mention Brian Stint at the mansion there with the bunny?
Oh, stop it.
It comes up constantly.
Yes, I'm sure. Thank you. We've got the picture, Brian.
I know. James Rosen, poker of bears and chief Washington correspondent for Fox News Channel. Thank you very much.